When I say Quebec, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Well, sure, it's a French-speaking province, but if you're a foodie like me, then it's all about poutine, or my absolute favorite, maple syrup, which, yes, in my mind, totally counts as food. And if you're into sports, it's probably the Canadiens. And as far as history, it would definitely be Quebec City. But did you know that the second oldest French city in North America after Quebec City is Trois-Rivières? It's nestled right at the confluence of the St. Lawrence River and the St. Maurice River, perfectly positioned between Quebec City and Montreal. It's Quebec, so its focus on local is a priority, especially when it comes to food and drink. And there's a lot of great restaurants to enjoy. There are plenty of cafes, much like what you would see in Paris, France, or pretty much any place in Europe, with people watching for hours at a time. Love it. It's a real hidden gem in the Mauricie region, offering breathtaking nature and a ton of history to explore, especially religious history. The Ursulines, shrines, and rosaries hung on clothing lines, a couple of miracles like a statue opening its eyes, and the massive pilgrimage thereafter. If I didn't create travel content, I'd be keeping this secret all to myself. Hey, welcome to Highway Highlights, a podcast that tells inspirational stories, uncovers hidden gems, and unlocks destination secrets. My name is Christopher Rutter, a day trip, road trip, all-around travel expert and content creator in the travel and tourism space. In this episode, we will discuss the former site of the Sacré-Cœur before it was burned down. We will discover the Ursulines of Trois-Rivières, a group of nuns who not only educated little girls, but also left a significant impact on local culture that continues till this day. And we'll explore the Cap de la Madeleine region and the two miracles on that site, which have made it a pilgrimage destination with millions of visitors. Okay, so I said Trois-Rivières sits on the confluence of the St. Lawrence River and the St. Maurice River, yet Trois-Rivières in English means three rivers. So what gives?
We start seeing the name Trois-Rivières roughly 1580, 1585. One cartographer on the map wrote the river of the three rivers, because you don't really have three rivers. It's the St. Maurice that ends in the delta, so you're going to have those three rivers right there. And it's pretty much at the end of the St. Maurice that the First Nation and the French would gather.
That's Jean-Philippe, a historian who runs a tour guide company called Personaire here in Trois-Rivières. The company specializes in historical tours. He is also a teacher at La Fléchette College, a college with a tourism course. With almost 30 years of experience, Jean-Philippe is a well-known figure in the city, offering exclusive and celebrity-like tours. And trust me, walking around with him, it feels like you're definitely hanging out with a celebrity.
Actually, Mr. Pont-Gravé, the first name he wrote was the River of the Three Rivers. So obviously they knew right from the start that it was simply one river. But yes, he was a cartographer in a place where you don't have a city. So you're going to look at a certain shape on a hill. You're going to look at various type of river. And that way, when people are going to navigate after you, they'll know exactly where they're at simply by the name you gave to the place.
Across from the fountain Pierre Boucher Place and just a stone's throw from Rue des Ursulines, the oldest street in Trois-Rivières, you'll find Hommage au Sacré-Cœur. This monument was constructed on the exact location where Sacré-Cœur stood before it was destroyed by fire in June 1908. The brown benches behind the statue represent where the parishioners once sat.
The imprint on the ground, the stones are not exactly the same color, so that way it gives you an idea. Well, it gives you an idea of the size because it doesn't at all give you an idea of what was inside. The inside of that church, it was all gold leaf covered all around the ceiling, the wall, everything.
Rumor has it that it was one of the richest churches in the area, and this most likely had something to do with fur trading. In fur trading, you can make 1,000% profit, but in a bad year, your crew would not return. So it's 100% loss. So you're most likely going to drop extra money in the collection to ensure you'll go to heaven afterward.
Yes, actually, it was the only church in Trois-Rivières. Well, there was two church in Trois-Rivières. You had the Saint Philip Church and you have the Sacred Heart one, and this one really was the center of town. It's the was like the second one built in Trois-Rivières, if memory serves me right. It was the pretty much you were entering fortification. It was right there next to you, and it's where the fire stopped. You had a small park just behind that, and but yes, that's where the fire stopped when you're in the historical district.
Instead of rebuilding the original cathedral in its original location, the parish authority was moved inside the cathedral. The cornerstone, or foundation stone, was also moved to the second church they were building, St. Philip Church. This resulted in having two parishes in Trois-Rivières as the population grew.
The Saint Philip Church has been tear down a couple of years ago, and the guy that was in charge of demolition of the building sold the stone back to the city, and that's why you have the cornerstone inside that museum today.
That museum, Manor Boucher de Niverville, happens to be the oldest manor in Trois-Rivières. But before we move on to the story of the Ursuline nuns, I wanted to talk about the current cathedral in downtown Trois-Rivières, the Assumption. The Assumption of Mary Cathedral is the main cathedral of Trois-Rivières Diocese. It was constructed between 1854 and 1858 and is devoted to the Assumption of the Virgin Mary.
The cathedral was actually the third diocese in the province of Quebec. First one being Quebec City, dating back from beginning of the French colony. It was a diocese that used to extend all the way down to Louisiana. After that, they split Quebec and Montreal when we were only the province of Quebec. Then you start having a lot of villages being built up north for all the lumber and all of that, and that's when rumors say that if the bishop visited every single village, three parish a day, 7 days a week, it would take him 3 years to visit every single parish. So it's time to start splitting parish, to start splitting diocese. So that's when they build a diocese in Trois-Rivières, look for a good location to build a cathedral. One of the last member of the Hart family that was in town, Moises Hart, passes away, and then you have like his last wife, Miss Mary McCarthy, she was close to the bishop that came appointed to Trois-Rivières, and told him, well, if you want, I could provide you with the land that used to be owned by a portion of the land that used to be owned by the Hart family. You'll be able to build your cathedral directly downtown, and that's exactly what happened.
Back in 1639, Mother Marie of the Incarnation, along with two other Ursuline nuns, three Augustinian sisters, and a Jesuit priest, embarked on a journey from Tours, France to New France, aka Quebec. When they arrived in the summer of 1939, they took the time to learn the language of the native people, and then started teaching the local children. Their lessons included reading, writing, as well as needlework, embroidery, drawing, and other domestic arts. The Ursulines focused on educating young girls, while the Augustine focused on healing and caring for the sick.
Trois-Rivières being Trois-Rivières, it was a town, well, pretty much population was explorer, fur trader, and things like that. So a lot of people that don't stay in place Trois-Rivières was not really big, but the need for a non-community, because the nun at the time, they were doing the teaching, they were doing hospital, they were doing the charity. So there was needs in Trois-Rivières, but the place was not big enough to welcome two community at the same time, because you need to make sure that those ladies are going to be able to eat, feed themselves, lodge themselves, and all of that. So the bishop in Quebec City asked for the Ursuline, would it be possible for you to come to Trois-Rivières, establish a school? Because usually the Ursuline, they're teaching nuns for young girls. We already had the Récollets that were there that were teaching for the boys, but to have the Ursuline arriving, teaching for the girls, that way we would have both school and we start having education and everything's going to make sense. But since population was too small, the Ursuline were asked, would it be possible for you to do the charity? Would it be also possible for you to start an hospital? And at first, population of Trois-Rivières, when they arrived, 300 people, it's not that bad. Yes, we'll be able to do an hospital, and as soon as population grow, we'll be able to have a second community coming in, and everything's going to make sense.
After the governor of Trois-Rivières was transferred to Montreal, the Ursuline sisters took over his house just outside the city limits. They started a small hospital and taught young girls and some indigenous children. The community slowly grew, and the hospital expanded to have 12 beds, which was sufficient for the small population, as Trois-Rivières never had more than 600 people at that time. For over 150 years, the Ursuline Hospital was the only one in town. However, as the population grew to 2,500, the hospital became overwhelmed, and the arrival of St. Joseph Hospital provided much needed relief.
But the Ursuline being the only non-community you have in town, they pretty much taught every single girl in town. They were in charge of everything related to the health. Even when the American tried to invade, they were the one who treated the wounded. The Ursuline, they were really your only community in town, and they were also the one teaching like cooking class and things like that to all the girls, to the point where we can say officially in the province of Quebec, you're able to know where the Ursuline were teaching, because the food that people are going to eat is not going to be cooked the same way that it's going to be elsewhere. The Ursuline, they come from Tours in France, or a region where you have a lot of stew, a lot of milk, and you see a lot of that in the local cooking. So it impacted all the way to your everyday life, where your Ursuline is going to be involved.
Wow, and that's still even till this day?
Oh yes, even to today. You have Saint-Hubert, which is a rotisserie that we have all across Quebec, and they do survey to see which kind of coleslaw is more popular in which section and which town and all of that. And when you're in Trois-Rivières, the coleslaw that is the most popular is going to be creamy coleslaw. It goes all the way there. You see, and even today you still have, and they have both coleslaw in the restaurant. They have the traditional one, that they have the creamy one, and they offer it in every single location that they have. But yes, when you're in Trois-Rivières, this craving for cream is going to go even in the coleslaw. So yes, even with all the change in population, the growth of the population, all of that, but people who grew in the pretty much in all the Morrissey were impacted by that.
The Augustine nuns, whom I mentioned earlier, taught the Ursuline how to treat the sick before coming to Trois-Rivières. The plan was to send Augustine to Trois-Rivières once the city was big enough, but unfortunately, it never happened.
Well, the Ursuline, they left the building not so long ago. The average age of the community was getting higher and higher. They needed more I'd say permanent care. So the Ursuline, the Daughter of Jesus, and the Carmelite all moved in together inside a retirement house. So the monastery was pretty much empty. The city put pretty much a building to norm, which was a problem at the time. But the museum is still inside. Now you have let's say the cultural branch of the city has office there. You're going to have the university, the CEGEP, the hospital also have office in that building. And from what I understood, you're going to have kindergarten opening inside the old portion of the monastery. The yard is big, but the school is still active. A couple of years ago, the Ursuline pretty much transferred their school to a lake community. It is all in the same building, but they now are pretty much autonomous. You have, I think, one or two Ursulines still on the board, but they're slowly retiring.
The reach of the Ursuline community worldwide demonstrates the impact of religious institutions on shaping local cultures and traditions. Through their work in education, healthcare, and community service, the Ursulines left a lasting legacy that continues to be celebrated and remembered in the communities they served. Amazingly, the Ursuline Convent in Quebec City is the oldest educational institution for women in North America. The land in Trois-Rivières was sandy, so it wasn't suitable for farming. Many settlers turned to fur trading instead, which caused conflict with the Jesuits and other authorities. To create a better community, some settlers, including Pierre Boucher, decided to start a new settlement across the river. They named it Cap de la Madeleine after Jacques de la Ferté, who was the abbot of Sainte Madeleine de Châteaudun in France. The settlement was founded on March 20th, 1651. The chapel was built around 1720 when the population was small. However, as more people started living in Trois-Rivières, families grew and the small chapel became too small. As a result, they built a second and then a third parish church. This marking a turning point in the history of Trois-Rivières as the community began to flourish and attract more residents. The devotion to the location began at the shrine, and the construction of the new parish churches and the development of the shrine in the area played a significant role, which led to miracle number 1.
The old shrine is the really first chapel that they've built, 1720. But this one at first was the parish church. And then they built a second one, a second parish church that was bigger, but they did not tear down the first one yet. They kept it. It was still a place where some people love to go and worship. But it was considered to be a bit more on the side. But then even the second chapel became too small. And then they were looking to build a third one. And when they wanted to build that one, the ground is still all in sand and they're looking for stone, and the closest stone you're going to find is going to be on the south shore. But to cross stone from the south shore to the north shore, you either take the ferry because there's no bridge in between, or you wait on winter. During winter, it's going to be cold enough. You're going to be able to build a ice bridge in between both shore, and that way you'll be able to cross the stone. So that was the idea.
During the winter, the plan was to wait for the cold weather to freeze the water between the two shores, allowing for the construction of an ice bridge. The idea was to have the equerry on the other side prepare sandstone and place it on the shore. In Christianity, equerry are those who substitute water for wine in the Eucharist. So as soon as it was cold enough, they would be able to cross to the other side, collect all the stone, and start construction in the spring. However, the plan hit a snag as January and February turned out to be warmer than expected, causing the ice bridge to be too weak to support the transportation of the stone.
Then at some point, beginning of March, you have the parish priest who look at everybody in the parish, and he asks them for something you usually don't do. And we have a belief in Quebec that if you're looking for good temperature, like for a wedding or something like that, you're going to hang your rosary on the clothesline, asking for warm and sunny weather. You have a wedding this weekend. You ask all your guests, please hang up your rosary on the clothesline. That way it's going to be great. But usually you ask it for warm and sunny. But believe it or not, the parish priest said, well, okay, we need cold and windy. So everybody, beginning of March, you're going to hang your rosary on the clothesline, and I want you all to pray that it's going to be cold and windy, so that way the ice bridge is going to stick long enough for us to cross all the stone. And believe it or not, it happened mid-March. Usually mid-March is when everything's going to start to melt. But no, not this time. It was pretty much ice coming from from the upper portion of the St. Lawrence that came down, pretty much jam right in front of the of the Cab Lemon, and it jammed long enough for them to water everything at night so it would freeze more, cross every single stone, and as soon as the last stone crossed, the bridge collapsed. And starting there, you start having people saying, well, okay, there's something really special about it. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's doing research for the Basilica, and he told me, well, I was curious. Is it something really impressive? Is it something like miraculous or something like that? And he said, I went and looked at the temperature, and it was warmer in Quebec City than it was in Trois-Rivières, which is never the case. So you have the local priests asking for that. You have the ice bridge forming. You have the cold temperature. All of that together, people are starting to talk. Well, this is definitely a miracle, and that's where we were able to cross the stone. And that's pretty much how you have a small devotion starting on the location.
Okay, so that actually, okay, so now we're going to get into the miracles. Miracles. But it's interesting because what you just said, it just clued on me, because I don't remember you saying that when we were walking about hanging the rosary on the line. Now that makes sense why that bridge is. Okay, now I just made that connection right now. So I'm actually kind of like, whoa, like it just hit me. Okay, all right. So so let's talk about the miracles then, because I couldn't remember which came first.
This is the first one that came in 1879. So yes, the ice bridge, or what people called it, the Rosary Bridge, because it was because of the Rosary that the bridge froze. So for them, the Rosary Bridge is pretty much the first true miracle of the location. And I say for the people, because if you speak with the authority of the Notre Dame Sanctuary, they're going to be a bit more cautious about it. I was talking to Father Remy, who's the director of the shrine, and he tells me, well, Jean-Philippe, to have an official miracle, it needs to be sanctioned by Rome. And it is not officially the case with us. They call them prodigy to make sure to do a distinction. Obviously, the folks that lived there at the time all said, no, this is a miracle, no question about it. Nobody's going to argue with that. There was no ice bridge during the winter with mid-March. Obviously, this is a miracle. This is God helping us build the place, and that's where everything started. So yes, that's pretty much the way it goes.
So, what do you think? Divine intervention, a miracle, or simply science? I'd love to hear your thoughts. In the meantime, let's explore the second miracle.
But after that, there was a second one that pretty much enforced all that perception. And on that, let's see the date, it was in 88. Was it in 88? June 88. Okay, June 88. You have.
We're talking 1888, right?
1888, yeah. You had the priest, which is Luc Desilets. Then you have Father Frederick, who's a Franciscan in the area, and you have Pierre Lacroix, who's a handicap, who was living not so far from there, but he was always on the location, always praying, hoping that his condition would get better. And on that night, those three men, without talking with one another, saw the statue of Mary open her eyes. And it was only a few months after that, because Mr. Lacroix died not so long after. And on his I'd say, final declaration before he died. He said, well, I'm happy because at least I saw the statue of Mary open her eyes. And he started describing all that scene, and people were not so sure about what he was talking about. So they went to Father Desilets, Father Frederick, and both of them confirm what he said. And after that, well, you have the Rosary Bridge. After that, you have the statue that opened her eyes, and both together, you start having a devotion.
That's so interesting.
It's one of the main reasons why you have three major pilgrimage sites in the province of Quebec. You have Saint Joseph Oratory in Montreal, you have Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré in Quebec, and you have Notre Dame in Trois-Rivières.
That actually makes sense. The three pilgrimage places, yeah. Because I know about the one about Beaupré.
Yeah, Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré, Saint-Anne being the grandmother. The grandmother always have a big signification for the First Nation, so her devotion close to Quebec makes a lot of sense. Saint Joseph in Montreal, Saint Joseph, he's the Saint Patron of Canada. He is the carpenter, he is the builder. Right from the time of New France, he was chosen as the Saint Patron of New France. So yes, those three together, you pretty much have the same family right there.
Yeah, that's funny because it's not until I talk to people like you that know the history that it just hits me. Like I mean, I did a great tour in Quebec about Anne Beaupré. So I knew that was a grandmother of Jesus. I knew that. But then like I've been to St. Joseph so many times, and then now it just hit me right now that Joseph is like, it just hit me that's the father. Like it just hit me right now. Like I'm just like Saint Joseph, yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, Saint Joseph, yeah, as usual. But boom,
right now, yeah, because the way that you just tied it all together, it just hit me right now. So all three of them have the pilgrimages, and that's I think because of the pilgrimage, that's the reason why I would imagine you needed to have the Notre Dame, the Cat Basilica, needed something bigger.
Well, yeah, because the parish we talked that they build with stone from the South Shore, even that, when you start having the statue opening the eyes, the devotion about the Rosary Bridge, and all of that, even that church became too small. So what they did is that they built a new church, Saint Madeleine Church, that became the parish church further up north in the Cap de la Madeleine, and left the building there pretty much, I'd say, outside your typical Catholic hierarchy. You know, you have your parish church, you have your cathedral, all of that. But no, it pretty much became a shrine, a place of devotion where they welcome everybody to pray Mary, to thank her for things that she's done for them and things like that. And at that moment, the shrine became became really something that was living on its own. And it became really popular. You had up to millions of visitors every year that was visiting the place when the devotion was at its strongest. And to the point where the third chapel that was built needed to be teared down to build the big basilica that you have today. And this one was built between 1954, beginning 1960s. It is huge. Anybody that goes inside is gonna see the big stained glass work. It's a big star-shaped building, no column in the middle. It is really an impressive building, and sometime if you go there in August during the celebration of the Assumption of Mary, you're gonna see all sorts of celebration.
Pretty cool stuff. We covered a lot of ground in this episode. We explored the fascinating history of the Cap de la Madeleine region, recounted the story of the miraculous Rosary Bridge and the subsequent devotion that led to the construction of the Notre Dame Cap Basilica, a major pilgrimage site here in Quebec. I want to say a big thank you to Jean-Philippe, but while we still have him here, in the next episode, we'll dive a little deeper into more of Trois-Rivières' history. Everything from the oldest house that narrowly escaped the massive fire that claimed Sacré-Cœur to the old prison, complete with some insider inmate stories. You want to stay tuned for that. Thank you for riding shotgun with me in this episode, and I look forward to hanging out with you in the next one. Take care.